welcome, André. Thanks for accepting the challenge to speak with us today. It's great to have you here. To start, can you share a little bit about who you are and what your journey with Elixir has been so far?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Luis. It's a pleasure. So I'm a software engineer out of college in 2009, so kind of old by now. um, yeah, and my journey, I started with like enterprisey stuff, .NET, VB.NET, and that kind of stuff. And I started to work with Elixir in 2016 when I joined, shortly after joining Onfido. They were like mostly Ruby, using Ruby on the monolith, but we had like a very specific use case where we thought Elixir could give us like an edge. We also had like Paulo Pereira, who had wrote a book before, so we kind of had like this perfect opportunity to try like an MVP with Elixir and see how it goes. And like it went amazingly well at the time. So like we were seeing like a third of the memory usage for the equivalent feature based with Ruby. So it was like you had to fetch media, decrypt it, and cache it for a while. And so we basically did the naive approach of fetching it with Elixir, keeping it in memory within a process, so that if a request comes in the next 60 seconds or so, if the process is still alive, registered, it would immediately return the blob. And just this like was an amazing improvement from the status quo we had. So it kind of like was a good experiment that solidified Elixir as an alternative for the kind of um, stuff that we were doing. A lot of parallel processing, and it grew from there. So there are still some use cases that are still orchestrated by Elixir. Right. Sometimes Elixir not is not necessarily doing the end to end. So it sometimes delegates the machine learning stuff to some Python code, but in the end, it's Elixir that is aggregating the results, doing like the parallelization, and then returning it synchronously. So yeah, started from there. Then we built some new services with Elixir. When I left Onfido, I was a team lead of the billing team. Also, we had like our service in Elixir, aggregating multiple billing events from the different regions we deployed. And now, fast forward to remote. Uh, I'm at remote for almost 4 years now, and we have like a big monolith, right? Which grew with us. So it's very interesting to see like the decisions we made earlier and the impact they are having now. The team growing a lot, right? From 20-ish engineers to more than 100 now, and how Elixir influences how we work, but also how it helps us to do what we need to do. Um, and yeah, like seeing Elixir growing, I don't know, from 1.3 to now to 118, right? As well, and tagging along all the improvements that were made, the LSP, the I remember Flow being like the thing where it would like really help to streamline those the processing that you could do. Then Broadway also like these are some of the highlights that I remember that when they were out, right? Live View. I was in Prague when Live View was kind of shown by McCord for the first time, and so like it's very cool to see that all after all these years the momentum hasn't slowed down in my view. It even I think accelerated, right? Because like it we are now like seeing Elixir for machine learning, the type system, the live view on its own, right? Companies only using it on the front end. It's incredible, like from that early seed, right? We now have live book as well. I think it's an amazing tool for the day to day. So yeah. I continue amazed and happy to be using it on a day-to-day
Awesome.
basis.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of things. Some of them will expand today. Also, obviously, you're going to be speaking at Alchemy Conf. That's the reason you're here today, and your talk is going to be. We'll go into details a little bit later, but it's going to be about your experience at remote. So some of those things will relate. Um, so yeah, so you mentioned remote. You've been there for 4 years. It grew a lot. Um, how has it been like to experience this growth? So it grew a lot. Can you share a little bit about like the main engineering challenges? I know your talk is going to be about some of these, so don't spoil too much. But what have been the biggest challenges if you had to get like a top three?
Yeah, I think with a team on the back end as big as we are now, like some of the stuff that you would do normally, I imagine a team of 5 or 6 working on their own separate service, right? You would probably continue to use the compile time config, right? Because that one gets you some kind of validation on at compile time. And for instance, we had to ditch that I think a couple years ago because a change to that config file would retrigger a compilation of the full application, right? And this would be like a very big pain, right? To everyone, you pulled master and you knew that, oh, now I need to compile the entire code base. So I previously the where at Onfido we had like those smaller services owned by a team, right? At most 5-10 people max. So this wasn't really a problem. So I find it interesting, like just by working as we are working now, right? A big code base shared by a lot of engineers. You need to have like different considerations to not hamper the work of other teams. Um, Initially, like it's still we still have like kind of an architecture guidelines that enforce you to ask you to create some handlers that use different services that return some values, and you might have finders to basically wrap the queries that you need to do to the database. And so this kind of enforcement, in the beginning I also felt it a bit strange, a bit too boilerplatey, right? But now, after all these years, it's obvious that I think it was a very benefit for us to try to enforce it from the get go, in the sense that when you pick some code or you need to touch some code from an area that you are not really used to it, you kind of are able to easily grasp what's happening. You find like a familiar patterns. So this is also something that in the beginning I felt it was a bit too strict, but clearly like it benefited us a lot in the long term.
Hmm.
um,
Do you think? Do you think? So you mentioned that architecture patterns and
mhm.
how they're enforced. Do you think that also goes into, I don't know if it's a philosophy, but definitely something that happens at remote, where you hire a lot of people that don't have an Elixir background and learn Elixir at remote? Does that help?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like in my experience, we have seen like like incredible ramp ups from engineers without Elixir experience. And so I think that's a sign, right? That first things are organized in a way that people don't feel overwhelmed and start are able to start contributing earlier. And I think it's also like a very a big statement on how um, easy it is to start working with Elixir due to the investment that it was made over time to having like a sane standard API, very well documented, right? One of the earliest things that I remember with Elixir, right, was like the docs are very polished, right? They are very complete. They are very easy to navigate, and like having the docs immediately accessible on the REPL, right? You do age enum and you get like, I think that's a superpower that sometimes people take for granted, but there are a lot of languages that it is not like that, right? And so I think it keeps like the feedback loop, the development cycle loop very tight, right? You don't need to leave your kind of IDE or terminal to keep advancing to get feedback. And so, yeah, I think those rules that we had, plus the niceties that Elixir brings right out of the box, are making for a very good experience.
Yeah. So that being said, though, you mentioned already a couple of times that at remote you decided to keep it as a monolith.
Mhm.
Um, do you still think that's was a good decision? Why keep it like that and not break it up, as you mentioned in on Fido? You had like smaller
Mhm.
services per team.
Yeah.
How do you
So
think that's going?
at on Fido, I think we were kind of pushed because the load patterns that we were seeing for those different components were very different, right? So you kind of needed to scale them differently. So I think that made a very strong case of splitting things. Whereas here at remote, we are starting to see some of those hints that we might need to split the monolith, right? The bigger chunks, but still split it. But taking the monolith so far, right, brought some challenges with it, obviously, but it's still we think it's still very important for to keep like the easy mental model of you open a transaction and you know that inside your transaction these side effects will happen, right? And you don't need to think about sagas or you need so in that sense we think that the developer experience or we still facilitate right the happy path by keeping the monolith, although right compilation times are a pain. Flaky tests affect a lot of people and happen frequently, right? Because there are a lot of teams working on the same code base. um, Shared database comes with its own um, challenges as well, right? You forget an index, your query is affecting another part of the application. So it's a trade-off that we constantly make, right? And need to assess every day. Where are we? But so far, the monolith serves as well, right? So because there have been discussions, right, since I don't know, since even very early days, whether we wanted to continue keeping the monolith, and so far the decision has been to do that. But I'm pretty sure that we are reaching a point where it will be a necessity to like carve out like probably two or three big uh, areas, especially maybe even like mapping to the organization of the company right now, right? um, because in a way the monolith evolved but the organization also
Yeah,
reshuffled
I
things a
was
lot.
going to mention that. So that it's one of the things like that's very prominent in the discussion. Monolith versus microservices is where do you break these microservices or macro services, however you want to call them. Do you think it'll be easier now because remote has like a few years already of organically kind of growing the teams and separating like which boundaries you have with like organization wise that now you can break the code to match those more easily?
Oh, definitely, right? Now we don't have guesses, right? We have experience accrued over time that allow us to almost like those natural boundaries kind of emerged, right? With the how with the time passing by. Like currently, I think it's important to state that we already have some smaller, let's call them satellites, right, outside the monolith, but they are very contained, right? And for instance, one of them was created to because we were expecting the very different load pattern, right? A public site that could be accessed from everyone. So we didn't want we wanted to basically isolate that part to not necessarily affect the monolith. But yeah, the monolith, I would say it's where 90% of us work on a day-to-day basis still.
Yeah. So your talk at Alchemy Conf is gonna be, I'm assuming, around topics like this. Is there anything in particular you'd like to share that we haven't talked about yet? without spoiling too much, but would you like to share with our audience?
Um, yeah, good. I think we will be talking about the monolith, right? But also, I
Mm.
also want to highlight how like some of the things that Elixir and the ecosystem offers us are serving also like the way we are working really well. So Ecto like has been like a godsend, right? And when it doesn't do everything we need, it's still easy to extend it, right? So imagine we are now in a process where we need to look at the data that we have more closely, like to classify it, right? To For teams to own the tables, etc. Ecto, right, the schema that it provides, the fields don't necessarily allow you to have like this kind of meta information, right? But you can easily extend the Ecto schema, the vanilla one, to have this kind of stuff, the fields or the field macro as well. And so uh, we haven't had a moment, right, where oh no, Elixir or Ecto or the ecosystem library doesn't support this use case that we need to write it from scratch or we can't extend it. So um, even situations where we had to contribute upstream, right, were very easy to do so. So yeah, I think it was like a bet that already paid off 100 times dividends over the long run. Yeah.
So to go a little bit, so moving a little bit out of remote specifically, and let's talk a little bit more about Elixir and the Elixir community
Hmm.
itself. So you mentioned there sometimes you contribute upstream, and Elixir has been really good. So how do you see Elixir and the Elixir community at the moment, and maybe with an emphasis in Portugal because that's where you are? Uh, do you think it is a growing community? Do you think it's we can do more?
Yeah, we can always do more, I think, right? But in terms of community, like especially in Portugal, I think like we are seeing in 2016 it was Talkdesk on Fido, not a lot more companies, and you start to see more and more startups using it over time. Um, and so my feeling is that it's definitely growing. On the meetup numbers, attendance numbers we have, you also see that, right? So I think the community keeps growing, and probably you don't have like a very big spike, but steadily and stably growing, right? And I think that's a good thing because like you don't see any drama, you see pain points that are identified being actively worked on, right? So to me, I think a very big sign of the maturity that we reached is the conversation about the language servers that we had, right? We had three, and then like it was kind of decide one was better in this, the other was better in that part, and so let's kind of do like a joint effort, right? And now try to come up like with a one that tries to aggregate the best features of each, and so and this happened, right, at least from my point of view, very naturally, right? Like the so I think this probably stems from José Valim and like all the Elixir core team, right? Always open to suggestions, super nice people, and I think that kind of that brings a nicety to the community that sometimes it's not. I don't think it's easily found in a lot of other communities around
Yeah,
other languages.
yeah. So you mentioned there that Elixir community, at least in the meetup you're helping organize in Lisbon,
Hmm.
is growing. Do you think, first of all, that remote helped in that, in getting more Portuguese people involved in Elixir, being that it's like a there's a lot of Portuguese people at remote,
Yep, yep.
uh, but also if it did, how do we get more companies to adopt Elixir so that we can generate more and more interest and more jobs so that more people can do it?
Hmm. Um, I think we need to continue to really share like the outcomes that we get right from using it. Like it's not a panacea, obviously, right? But at the same time, like I think it has even a strong business case in the sense that it's not a niche language anymore, right? The ecosystem is very big. Like you don't have to write your own libraries most of the time for what you need. There are like alternatives for a lot of the use cases that are commonly needed when for a startup or for a company when they're building their own systems. And I think it's important to try to stop or to the myth that, oh, it's very hard to hire Elixir people, or it might be because you might be looking for people with 10 years of Elixir experience, right? But if you look for like strong engineers in other languages and make sure like you have like a structured onboarding, uh, and don't just simply throw people to the deep end of the pool, you will see like incredible results. And we have seen that over and over and over again. So at this stage, I don't think it's like an anecdote. It's really like the what happens. Like you can ramp up people in a way that they contribute a lot, and where they need to go, use like more exotic concerns like OTP, or like supervisors, or they need to dabble with macros. They might need to do that, but there's also like very good uh, um very good info on that, on those subjects. So they have like the path to grow. Uh, yeah, I think it's easy to ramp up someone and for them to not feel overwhelmed, for them to feel confident along this journey.
Awesome. So a few years back, you also you wrote a book about Elixir, right? Called Mastering Elixir. What led you to decide to write a book? It's not something you just do like I think from one day to the other. So what happened
Yeah.
there?
um Paulo Pereira had written a book for the same publisher before, and like the opportunity, they wanted to write a book about like a specific Elixir version, and we kind of like ended up agreeing with them that that doesn't make much sense. Elixir is like releasing a lot of versions like every year, so probably let's try to focus on like on what the language can do for you, like as generic as possible. And at the time, like we felt that there are incredible books, right? Elixir in Action, the Paul Thomas book as well. But there were more introduction as an introduction to the language, and we felt that you didn't have any like example or an application that you would be building along the chapters. And so we kind of felt that there was a gap, right, in terms of what was available. So we decided to write that book basically. So like quick intro, right, in the early chapters, but you started to like to build a Dropbox clone that tried to illustrate a lot of the features of the language along the journey. And
Got it. And yeah, as we mentioned, you wrote this a while ago. So, is there anything in particular that changed in Elixir since then that you wish you could add now?
good question. Since 2018, like I imagine if we would be now rewriting the book or revisiting it, I think live book needed to be there for sure, right? Because I think it allows you to it's such a different way, I think, to interact with your running system, right? Almost like a new channel, a new window that you can use to have this kind of visibility and to interact with it. That I feel that wouldn't be mandatory to talk about, right? Previously, we only had the observer, right, where you could look at the system, or you had to connect a shell to the running system and to interact with it via the shell. And now like the live book kind of opens up a lot of new possibilities. So yeah, that's the one that comes to mind.
Okay. Um, Moving on to something a little bit more personal, just curiosity. You mentioned so you have 5 kids.
Yeah.
Let's put it out there. How are you able to balance your like work life experience, writing a book, going to meetups,
Let's be honest.
working?
When I wrote the book, I only had one kid, so it was easy mode back then.
Okay,
But yeah, the book, like we wrote it like in a very short amount of time. So like I
okay,
would say 6 8 months. So a lot of early mornings, like waking up at 5 a.m. to write stuff before work or to write stuff before the kid woke up, going in the weekends to the office. So like obviously to do this I had like a lot of help from my wife and from my family. Nowadays like my family life kind of imposes me the schedules, right? So whenever I have like an hour, half an hour that I know that I can work, like I think it's kind of steroids for your focus, because I know that I need to focus because otherwise I might not have the opportunity to do what I need to do. And so like I don't have social media, right? And I try to block a lot of the content that I know that it will suck me in, right? So news articles, hacker news, etc. I try to like to block those as much as possible. And yeah, doing my best. Remote also has like a lot of allows us to have a lot of flexibility, right? We reduce a lot to the minimum the number of synchronous meetings that we need to have. So it allows you to, okay, in the morning I'm here with you, right? But I know that I can like work later or work in different time hours. That's definitely not an issue.
awesome. I was curious because I bet it's hard to balance all that. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
props for that.
Not easy. Thank you.
Um, so just in general, to kind of wrap up, what advice would you give to engineers that are either like starting to work with Elixir or looking to move to Elixir?
Um, Good question. A friend of mine a few years ago, like he's still using Ruby, and I remember he saying, "I tried Elixir, but it didn't stick. Like I wasn't able to kind of grasp like the core mechanics of it." And I think like that might happen, right? But it's not necessarily related with Elixir, but more with functional programming, right? And at first, I think it might feel a bit weird, but yeah, try to stick with it in the beginning. And there are very very good info and books and online. Like the Elixir forum is a trove of incredible knowledge, and also reach out to people, right? Because the Slack, the Elixir Slack as well, like look for meetups in your area, because I really think that even if you are feeling overwhelmed or in the beginning you feel that you don't know exactly how to start, like reach out, because people are super welcoming, and they will definitely help you get up to speed.
Yeah. And definitely Alchemy Conf will be another opportunity to be with people. There's going to be
Yep.
plenty of time to talk with
Yep.
everybody. So yeah, Andre, thanks again so much for joining and taking this time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. And see you in a couple of months at Alchemy Conf.
Yeah, see you. Thank you, Luis. Super cool.
Thank you.
Bye.